Hey folks, it's your buddy Mike Messier, One Pro Wrestling and Sports Fan YouTube channel. I'm not going to tell you anything you don't already know. This is just one guy, one opinion, one set of thoughts, maybe some unique slants on this. Conor McGregor claiming an injury, his camp claiming an injury. I think the word is that it's a leg injury, and this has been bouncing back and forth for about a week, maybe more. I think we saw some, so he won't be fighting Michael Chandler. I believe it was June 29th, Saturday night, for the big UFC 303 main event. Big disappointment. I did get back into The Ultimate Fighter, and I watched Conor and Chandler. I wasn't too familiar with Chandler. Some of you may know that I kind of go in and out of MMA. Kind of more of an old school guy. Randy Couture, I interviewed him a long time ago. You can find that on this channel. Guys like that, like that 2005 to 2010 was probably my sweet spot for watching UFC. But I still keep up with it, and I've gotten back into it because I go to the movie theaters. This is a word of wisdom to you gentlemen that don't know this. Regal Cinema is doing this now. In the past, Cinemark theaters did. These are the chains here in Florida where I live. Where you live, who knows? But Regal Cinemas, AMC, check these theaters. A lot of them do the MMA for $25. You can watch the pay-per-view on a big screen. It's a lot of fun. I find it to be fun. The last time I went for UFC 302 just a few weeks ago, I happened to be the only person in the theater. And yes, I took my shoes off, okay, in the theater. Also, Dave & Buster's. They've been doing this stuff. They've been having the AEW pay-per-views. Sometimes they do UFC. And then you have your things like your chicken places and all that shit. I just say that because I do feel like the UFC pay-per-views are way too expensive now, $80 a pop usually. I don't know if they were to charge more for this UFC 303. I think they probably were going to charge more than usual. And I think they were offering like a $10 rebate if you ordered in advance. Asterisk, card subject to change. I feel bad for the fine folks. I mean, I don't feel too bad for them if they could afford it to fly out to this fight, to watch this fight in person. The hotels, the babysitters, the prostitutes, anything that people had to do to get themselves psyched up to see UFC 303 in person. Yes, they've made some fine fill-in matches, some fine substitute main events and so forth. And I feel like real fight fans are really going to enjoy the card, maybe even better. I think that's one thing UFC does do a pretty good job now, especially the last couple of years. When they do have a major situation like this, they do recover pretty well. They try to give the fans more than their money's worth, and I respect that. I just feel like you are going to have maybe a 10 to 20% of the ticket buying public who were just there for Conor. And those people, you could give them all the top main events and they wouldn't be happy. You know what I mean? Now, just doing a little bit of research, I didn't realize that I knew Conor had lost his last fight because I went to the movie theater to see his last fight 3 years ago. And it's interesting. It's July 10th. Was it July 10th, 2021? I went to the movie theater. I watched that fight. There was a good crowd there. I remember the undercard was pretty good, like the main card, but like the undercard fights on the main card. The theater had a good amount of people in there, the movie theater, to watch this fight in Orange Park, Florida. And, Conor had that leg injury, foot, I think it was a foot, the ankle thing. They stopped it at the end of the first round. Poirier's wife, I think, flicked off Conor. He had made some suggestive comments to her. I thought that was funny. And, Poirier, as we know, has gone on to some big fights with Gaethje, and I did a review of that one, and he just lost a fight, recently. That was a great fight, a great defeat, I would call it. That was at 302, correct? So here we are at 303, and we've got this situation. Now, Michael Chandler, I'm not too informed about him. You guys could fill me in. Apparently, he came in as the big guy from another competition league, another MMA group. He's lost 3 out of his 4 fights, too. Apparently, he lost to Gaethje. I didn't see that fight. Who'd he beat? Tony Ferguson. And then he lost to Poirier as well by that rear naked choke. So he's not the greatest fish in the frying pan either. So, I mean, basically what we have here is a comeback fight, which seemed kind of stylized to give Conor a pretty good chance of winning, and let's face facts. I mean, Dana knows that, he wants Conor fights because Conor's box office, even with all these losses, 3 out of his last 4 fights are losses. Obviously, that exhibition against not Roy Jones Jr., for Christ's sakes, Mayweather. It's hot. That's why my brain's scrambled. But Mayweather, he lost that, but that was kind of just a novelty thing. But here we are, and Conor, this was really tailor-made for Conor to get back on that victory road, and probably with this as a victory, if he were to have beaten Chandler, he'd probably get a title shot, because they just know it's box office, it's money. So that all being said, I'm not terribly surprised. I believe it was at UFC 302. I was watching that, and I think towards the end they made note that the press conference for 303 had been canceled, and I had a feeling at that moment, okay, this fight's not going to happen. This Conor McGregor, fight with Chandler is not going to happen. I just felt it. And like I said, I'm not an MMA expert. I'm not a UFC expert. I know some things. I don't know a lot of other things. I just had a feeling they don't, Conor especially, like the press conference is his whole deal. You know what I mean? And he lives for those press conferences. That's what he's good at. And it just kind of sucks because if the press conference is canceled, especially on Conor's end, that the fight is not only in jeopardy, but most likely not going to happen. Now, there was this whole sub-story, and you MMA people, the mass holes, the MMA assholes, and all these people would know this. That's a YouTube channel. That the Ariel Helwani, who's like a former fighter, more of a reporter now, he was getting criticized by our buddy Bisping, Michael Bisping, the Count. Bisping taking exception to Ariel covering the story, which I don't quite understand. And I think what's going on there, I just watched this other guy talk all day about it. But basically, to me, Bisping just has the jock mentality. Like, he still wants to be one of the boys. You know what I mean? That's kind of like when the wrestlers, like the pro wrestlers like Ric Flair or whoever, they do these podcasts, but they don't really want to be a podcaster. They still want to be a wrestler. They don't want to fully give out information. They don't want to fully state opinions that might be, disrespectful to their colleagues. So with Bisping, I think Bisping has to take the big L on this one. I mean, Ariel, and I don't think he's the Prince Valiant either, because I watched his report, his podcast report last night, and he was kind of stumble fucking through the first 5 or 6 minutes and basically taking shots at Bisping and putting himself over, himself being Ariel, and saying what a great journalist he was. Like, basically, he was giving everyone an "I'm right, you're wrong" lecture. Well, okay, buddy, but, the thing to do in that situation is let other people do that for you, Ariel. I mean, because I'm quite often right about things, but the thing to do is let your accuracy, let your acumen speak for itself, and, rubbing people's faces in it or calling out Bisping, it doesn't really certify Ariel. It doesn't do anything for him. The thing for him to do is just to keep the high road and just continue to be the intelligent one, the reporter, and let Bisping flop like a fish in idiocracy. But in any event, so now we are where we are. They've revamped this card. Maybe at some point I'll do a video with some thoughts on this revamped card. But off the top of my head, I just it took me 9 minutes to get to this point. What do I think of McGregor? What do I think of this situation where he's backing out due to injury? A couple of things. First, to give him the side of the benefit of the doubt. It's possible that he was really training for this fight. It's possible he really wanted to fight this fight. He was really looking forward to it. He really wanted to get back on that comeback trail. And he just happened, through the gods of war, suffered this training injury. And there's nothing he could do about it. And he's just not fit to fight. And, even if he wanted to fight, you want to get doctor's consent. They want to get clearance. Or maybe he couldn't put the full weight on his leg or whatever the fuck. in that case, if that is to be true, which I don't know if it is or it's not, it's sad because I think everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people can relate to situations where you're up against the wall, you've done some things that weren't perfect, you fucked up, and now you get a chance to redeem yourself. And that redemption is kind of taken away from you too. Like your chance to redeem yourself for whatever reason, and you look bad. You look like, because you were sick or ill or had an injury or whatever the fuck it was, or you missed a ride, or you missed your plane ride, or you got stuck in traffic, whatever you were trying to do that would have redeemed yourself to some friends or family or work or whatever, you just got fucked. And now you really, how many times can you play the dog ate my homework routine? Like, how many excuses can you make? Because even if people believe you on this latest excuse, they'll backtrack and say, well, what about the time you did this? And what about the time you did that? And I think with Conor, that's where we are now. Even if we were to believe the leg injury, the training injury, then we can kind of poke back and say, well, you didn't do the steroid testing. You didn't, submit to the steroid stuff, and you fucked around and you made Chandler wait on the vine for a year and a half. So I think it's the goodwill to Conor McGregor is gone. There's no goodwill, very little goodwill, very little feelings of giving this guy a break or giving him the benefit of the doubt. And I don't think, and also you might be saying, well, what has Conor ever done? Well, I mean, was it 4 or 5 years ago, Conor took a fucking chair and threw it at a bus, and a fighter, I think a female fighter even, got like some glass from the bus window in her eye. And I think, was it 2 or 3 fighters in the bus lost fights? And I'm hoping that they all got paid money for those fights, because Dana was quick to cover that up as much as he could and give Conor a big exception, I think. My point is, I don't think Conor has really earned any passes from the MMA fan base. And like I said, I'm not an expert, I'm just one fan here. But I don't think Conor has really earned the goodwill from anyone, fighters, the community, whatever the fuck you want to call it. And you might say, well, gee whiz, Mike, he doesn't need us. He can go do whatever the fuck he's going to do. Okay, fine. Then why is he signing up to fight Chandler in the first place? It's something that he needs to do. I mean, there's other fights, other great shows have happened. UFC 300, Khabib, his career has come and gone. All these guys, no one's just sitting around. Real MMA fans are not just holding their dicks waiting for Conor McGregor to fight. There's plenty of guys that can fight. And women too, by the way. So, that all being said, I do feel like Conor is kind of a guy trapped between worlds. Maybe he feels like he needs to fight. He doesn't know what else to do. Maybe he just wants to drink himself into a stupor and be like one of these, and I've been associated with people like this, people that peaked at a young age or a relatively young age, and then they just want to rest on those laurels and party and drink and get whatever declining level of female they can get to suck them off and so forth. So maybe that's what Conor wants to do. And, seeing some of his social media posts, that's what would be seemingly the case. Chandler, for his part, and people are kind of, singing the Michael Chandler blues here. He put out a tweet. This YouTube guy really was said, oh, this seems like a really depressing tweet, this guy that Chandler wrote. I didn't see it as depressing. I mean, I saw it as him, he either Chandler himself wrote this or someone in his camp wrote it. But like this, it doesn't matter who's on the other side of the fist, like trying to be 365 up, trying to be positive about this whole thing. And I just felt like, what else is he supposed to do? I mean, is he supposed to call Conor a coward? I mean, is he supposed to say it's a bullshit injury? Is he supposed to wish Conor well in recovery? What would be the thing he could do? My question, which I don't have the answer, maybe you fine folks do, does Chandler get paid anything when these fights get canceled? I mean, because I would assume, and I don't know, but I mean, I would assume Chandler has to pay his manager, I mean, he has sparring partners. I mean, if he has a camp, if he's got a gym that he either owns or rents or leases, however that works, I would assume that just being in training camp costs quite a pretty penny. I would assume that these camp partners, at least the way I think it works in boxing, you have to pay sparring partners or at least feed them. So I would assume that Chandler, there is some losses here financially for Chandler if he's twiddling his dick waiting to fight this guy and the fight's not happening to get that money back and to get his big payoff. You know, and I think people forget that. I know I do. When you hear, like, you know, going back to the boxing days, Lennox Lewis, 15 million, Evander Holyfield, 15 million, Mike Tyson, 20 million. When you hear about these big payoffs in boxing, especially in that era and even now, you forget that they have managers, they have publicists, they have training partners. If they're renting a gym or owning a gym, they probably have a wife or an ex-wife they have to pay for, kids. So yes, they get all this money, but there's other people that are taking little slices of that pie. I don't know how that works for Michael Chandler or any UFC fighter. But I'm just curious, and like I said, you can answer the question, experts, if you have it. Does Chandler get some type of payoff when these fights don't happen? When he sits around on his dick and doesn't fight, does he get some type of payoff? I just have to take a sip of my beverage. It's a hot day. Anyway, folks, my feeling is I'm not surprised. I am disappointed. Interestingly enough, although I would have really liked to have seen this Chandler McGregor fight, I would have gone to the movie theater. It was playing. I'm sure that they'll still play whatever show it is for UFC 303. I was given an opportunity. I got this email kind of out of the blue about basically a stage, like a 24-hour stage play thing where I could, you know, be a writer, director, or actor. And I just chose to act in it. It was the least of the responsibilities, but just one of these fun kind of community theater events. You know, a local improv group was sponsoring some type of thing, and I said, fuck it. So I signed up for it. And then it was like the Saturday night, and then I'm like, oh, wait, is that? And then, yes, of course, whenever you sign up for something and you don't check your dates of everything going on in the world, that happened to be the UFC 303 night. And then it's like, well, maybe I can do the acting thing and then squimish my way over to the movie theater or whatever the fuck, watch this fight somehow. But then it's like, oh, yes, we'll have two performances, 8 p.m. and 10 p.m., and then we'll have an after party. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not seeing McGregor fight. Well, now no one's seen McGregor fight. So, yes, I will apparently miss UFC 303, but I don't even have to get too pantied up about it because basically I would have missed it anyway. You know what I mean? I'm not seeing McGregor, but I'm not going to see the substitute matches, so I guess I'm going to sit this one out. I do have the UFC Fight Pass, the $50 a year app. If any of you fine folks have any suggestions for fights I should see, or more importantly, full events, that's kind of my gimmick. I just watched, I think it was it Khabib and Gaethje? It was the last UFC event from Fight Island, I guess 2021. And I like watching full cards. I kind of see it as, and I do this with pro wrestling too, I like watching a full event, not just one match. To me, the difference is like listening to an album versus listening to a single. Like, I find that to really enjoy a fight, I want to see the fights that became before that fight on the same evening, and possibly, you know, if it wasn't the last fight on the card, I want to see what came after for context, for historical purposes. That's how I enjoy things. I know some assholes will just say, oh, I want to watch this fight, and they'll just tap into the one fight and watch it. For me, I want to watch the whole evening, okay? And because UFC's been doing all these fight nights, these fight islands, these pay-per-views, I've probably watched 10 to 15% of them, and most of that would probably be stacked towards the beginning years in the 2005 to 2010 era, when I was watching pretty much every fight night, every pay-per-view. These days, not so much, except the last couple of years. So anyway, One pro wrestling and sports fan, one artist, Mike Messier, for my wonderful abstract art, one Mike Messier for my movie reviews, one Man in a Camera films. All my books and all my links are at Mike Messier, Mike Messier.com. Thanks. Have a good weekend.